Fiddle, written by Sarah Chastain, narrated by Sarah Chastain. And Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Chapter 1, Le Veritable Dragon Rouge. The all-African crew crowded around their new captain in awe and with confusion. This was to be their first day enslaved to a white man such as Captain Avery. Avery hushed the crowd with a grin and the shaking of a bag that clinked of gold coins. "My men, you have been slaves too long in your land," commanded Avery, "and now you stand on my land, the ocean. I am here to tell you that you are now free men as pirates. On this ship you will be promised treasure beyond your wildest imagination, women of the most exotic type, and food and rum for every ported night." The men gazed up at Avery as if they had seen a ghost. They could not imagine the luck they had at stepping aboard the Recipsolocator. "My men," began Avery again, "to each of you a gold doubloon as a price for your freedom on my ship. This is the first start of your treasure, and I ask of you to value it greatly. As for each of you, you can spend this doubloon, but I must say I shall ask for it first in exchange for your freedom to leave this ship. It is a worthy price for the pirate that chooses to bury his treasure and stay on board this ship, for he will be rewarded with valuables far beyond this doubloon." The men began cheering, and some even cried as the captain passed out the gold to each and every newly recruited man on the ship. "And now," said Avery as the bag emptied itself of coins, "we drink!" A large barrel of rum was tipped over, and everyone rushed to get a glass so they could celebrate their new freedom as pirates. Hours later the celebration continued, but Avery snuck down to his cabin where he left his lovely wife in her hourglass. It was Scarborough who first noticed her 8 eyes imprisoned in the hourglass, Captain Avery acting strange. He busily locked his door nightly and pored over a tiny slip of paper. "Scarborough," he spoke to the spider as if he knew she could understand, and sometimes she would move or wiggle in response. "This dear," knowing the spider could no longer regurgitate his secrets, "is a piece of a treasure map." Avery now chose Scarborough as his closest confidant. "A 7-desk treasure chest, in fact, and let me tell you how they come to be like this. 7 castaways of a crew were shipwrecked with all their gold. These 7 men hid their booty on the island so no one could find it without the map. The map was divided into 7 pieces, 2 being the compass and the legend, the rest being notes of the island and where to go looking." Scarborough fidgeted with her web, which she always did now, and Avery took that as credit she was listening. Avery continued, "This is a 7-desk treasure chest, as I said, as all 7 of these men died 7 different ways, but not before putting out the 7 separate pieces of the map in a bottle and setting them out to sea. Starvation and agony awaited those men, so the first one used a bullet to get out. I know this because this is what the last piece, and there is a note on the back of it about how each man died," Avery continued. "I know of another person who has a piece. That is how it got out, that all 7 must have been found. But by who?" "I found this bottle afloat 10 years ago, and have been searching for the island ever since," Avery sighed with discontent. "Alas, I have finally arranged to exchange for 2 other pieces of the map, thanks in part to your wedding treasure, Scarborough." And he laughed cruelly at her predicament. "Don't worry, you can keep your hourglass for now. We have plenty of booty to go around." Just then Aunt Nancy, in full tarantula form, decided to make an appearance. Choosing that moment, she transfigured into her old woman's self and said, "If it's treasure you be after, then I'm on the right ship, but not without the help of magic will you ever find it." "Who are you?" screamed Avery, surprised at the sudden appearance of the old woman. "I'm Aunt Nancy," said the woman. "I am the one responsible for your wife's predicament, or should I say the Ashantehenne's wife. Still in mourning are you, my lovely Scarlet? By the way, what a lovely ship you have here. It would be a shame for someone to expose its inner workings." She then popped back into her tarantula self and scurried into a hole with no hope of anyone but Scarborough following into. Avery turned to Scarborough and glowered. "A friend of yours, eh?" "I know how we can find this treasure," called Anansi from her hole, "but it will require some of my books from my library." Anansi scuttled out and went over to one of the trunks that were particularly heavy and presumably filled with vast quantities of treasure, but when she exposed its contents it was filled with books. Dangerous books. Books on subjects no one dared discuss out loud. Books on black magic. She pulled several leather-bound titles from the collection before she finally got to the grimoire she was looking for, the Lesser Keys of Solomon, or Ars Goetia, a valuable book in summoning treasure-finding evil spirits such as demons. Aunt Nancy's magic must have been effective as ever, because within a year the ship's cargo bay swelled with treasure as she had taken more than she could hold in gold, silver, and jewels from her capture of the prize Ganji Swaji, a flagship so treasure-laden that it rose several inches above the water line once Avery relieved it of its bounty. Her escort, the Faith Mahamadi, was no match for the several other pirate vessels that had joined forces with the unforgiving captain, and his crew swiftly took over the entire operation. The hardest job was splitting the loot fairly among the men, as settling squabbles was more unsettling than the actual seizing of the treasure of itself. By the time the sun had set on the third day, Avery and his crew set sail for their final destination, the Caribbean. The hourglass had become legendary in that amount of time as a timepiece and as an oracle for the good or bad news. Whether a ship was going to sink or not was all dependent on the telltale signs of my red belly in the hourglass, for I was the actual magic inside the miracle, and my idea of whether or not we could weather a storm seemed to depend on whichever way I pointed. If my head faced the sky, it meant clear skies ahead and to hoist the flag, which now proudly was dedicated to my hourglass. It seemed my web-making ability and my spider instincts gave me paranormal powers over predicting stormy weather better than any barometer, because 9 times out of 10 I was right about the degree of the climate change and what it would take to get through the storm. So right, in fact, that I was on 3 different rowboats, mostly false alarms, in different evacuations, as superstitious as the old pirates were about making sure I survived the storms I predicted so well. In 1696, Avery vanished, at least from all record books. He was a very rich man, that Henry Avery, and time with the crew was running short. He decided to count his blessings and retire early, so that was when he decided to trade the life at sea for another, a life on land, as a very rich man. He traded our ship for a large sum and bought a nice house in one of the colonies. The only one to stay on as a friend and servant was Aunt Nancy, who knew no other life than caring for Avery and conjuring the necessary juju for daily tasks. And of course I stayed with them, at home, in my hourglass. It had been 25 years since that day when Aunt Nancy and Avery had met. It was now 1721, and our assembly was coming to a close. My head hung low. It meant that I didn't know what lay ahead, may or may not be survivable. Aunt Nancy and Avery soon became my best friends and my only link to the outside world. They both began a life of plundering that was only fair to those involved in a share of booty. They always swore that I would get my share of booty as well, if I wasn't a spider, that is, but to keep the hourglass as my most expensive home and consider it my hard work as levy paid on my precious home. This I liked to a certain degree, always swearing that I would one day regain my form anyways, and that I would still insist on keeping the hourglass as a token of my appreciation. Avery and Anansi plundered the deep blue seas dry, it seemed. With their mischief and glory, it seemed that Scarborough and our predicament were all but lost on Avery and Anansi, except for the occasional mention of Avery that he promised to still love Scarborough, even in her darkest form, forever, usually after he came home from a night ashore smelling of rum and perfume from some other lady. Though it is a mystery to some, Captain Avery could read. It seems the scars on his face never deterred him from the idea that his mind was intact, and he used every opportunity to read without abandon. This is one of the reasons why he was captain after all. He could read charts and orders fairly easily. And read he did. He digested material, and not slowly, like a famished man with an unquenchable thirst. He had taught Scarborough before they had gotten themselves into this predicament. In his main cabin sat huge stacks of books on every subject matter. Within this library of know-how he had pulled 3 or 4 quite regularly. One of them was open and lying on the table now. It was an old captain's log that detailed sailors' dailies and comings and goings. But others' books had been pulled out more recently, as well, including the Grimoire of Honorius, the Grimoire of Verum, Ars Goetia, Lemigeton Claviculaire, Solomon, and now Scarborough sat with interest inside the hourglass reading through the magnified mirror in another language. This current book was rather large and old, leather-bound, and though it made little sense to her, she liked examining the words on the paper when there was nothing better to do. All she knew was the title of the book, Le Véritable Dragon Rouge, or The True Red Dragon, but from what little she could make out, the book had little or nothing to do with dragons, one of her favorite creatures. She thought to herself at how they were mythical, assuming that just because she had never seen one didn't necessarily mean they did not exist. Mythical just meant that they were very rare, and perhaps one day she'd be lucky enough to partake in sighting of a dragon or even a unicorn. Many rare creatures were being proven more real by the day. Just recently there was sightings of a kraken that no one could debate off the bow of a Navy vessel, a very good source of information. Scarborough, said Avery, breaking her concentration. It's been quite a few years and a whole lot of pirating. And, well, I must say I've been fairly lucky. Scarborough wriggled back and forth in agreement. Over the years of Scarborough being a spider, Avery and she had formed a coded communication, no longer relying on Aunt Nancy for discussion. But I miss being a pirate, and you miss being a human, and seeing that play the other night gave me an ideas on how we could fix both our predicaments. He was, of course, referring to the tragical history of Dr. Faustus, a play that they had both witnessed the other night from an opera box at a theater in town. Avery had taken to wearing Scarborough in her spider form and a talisman around his neck so she could go everywhere with him, including plays and poker games. She was his good luck charm, and even though they were no longer terrorizing the sea together, they still did everything else together. I so much enjoyed the musical entertainment, continued the enthusiastic Avery, especially the fiddles. You know, the devil plays a fiddle. Mighty well, they say. Scarborough wriggled impatiently inside the hourglass, and Avery laughed. Why, yes, that's exactly what I mean, my lady, followed Avery. The part where he promised to change Faust into any shape he chooses. If the devil can change Faust into any shape or form he chooses, perhaps he can change you back into a human. Avery paused momentarily, not wanting to say what came next. Of course you will have to exchange your everlasting soul. But before you protest, seeing Scarborough's reaction, Avery quickly spat out the next sentence. I have a plan. I want the devil's fiddle, and you want your form back, so I was thinking we might have to kill him to obtain what we both want. Now, we both know you will never have to lose a fight, even if you bite, so what have we got to lose? Your poison should be more than enough to knock him out. Scarborough held one arm to her chin in contemplation and began to think about the problem, then, after a long while, jutted out another in a mock hand to finger shake, signaling that she and Avery had a deal. Her poisonous bite had been the death of more than one man that had crossed Avery at sea. Well, it was one more, especially the devil. Hopefully it would all go well, and Avery could just switch his own fiddle in place of the devil's, and have him be none the wiser to the situation. I've been doing some research since the other night, smirked Avery, pointing to the open book on the table, Le Veritable Dragon Rouge, and it contains a spell called Lucifuge Rufacal that will summon the devil himself to make a pact with him. I've studied it, and there are a few preparations that are necessary, such as a rod of hazel that's cut by a new knife at the horizon as the sun sets. Yes, Scarborough sighed. Avery, I will consult Aunt Nancy, and no, I don't think we will get in over our heads. Nothing like what happened to Faust will happen to us.